Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to the Anchorman Show. I'm Matt Gaetz. We found out what the Anchorman Show really needed. Fewer anchors and women. We are breaking the gender barrier on the show today. We've got two fantastic figures in media, Gabrielle Cuccia, our OAN Chief Pentagon Correspondent, and the Chief White House Correspondent for the War Room, my good friend Natalie Winters, and as always, my on-again, off-again employee, the founding producer of the War Room podcast, a producer of the Matt Gaetz Show, and the upcoming guest host of the Matt Gaetz Show, Vish Burra. How you doing, Vish?
I'm doing fantastic here. I'm keeping the seat warm here for you, this captain chair, but I'm hoping that I'd never have to give it up, and it gets hot enough so I could cook bacon on the armrest. So I'm hoping you're enjoying your time out there in D.C., Matt.
I can feel your envy that you are not here in this vibey setup that our terrific team in Washington, D.C. put together. And Gabby, I wanted to start with you. You've got such an interesting background, having worked in the Obama White House.
That usually gives people heartburn when you say that.
Well, but
yeah,
I think it's giving you great perspective. Talk a little bit about kind of what brought you to this role as our chief eyes and ears and reporter at the Pentagon.
Sure. Yeah. So my first job out of college, like any person who wants to be in the heart of it all, I thought, where else can I go but the White House? So I went on USA.gov on jobs nonstop, 84 applications, the 84th one happened to be White House IT. And so when I got the phone call for the IT position, it was mostly focused on software. But somehow along the way, when I was talking to the person on the other line, who actually ended up being, and still is, the Obama's personal technical person that does the Obama Foundation. I know, don't give me don't blow me up, I'm good. But we got into a long conversation talking about Sony Vegas Pro, which is what I used to do, like fun videos on my off time when I was at UPenn. And so hit it off with him, ended up getting an internship. So I was just approaching my senior year of college. What's funny is that I always talk about how DC operates, right? It's super reactive, really slow. And so at that time, remember, Obama had the very first digitized campaign, somewhat, right? So, yeah. And that's what made it a successful campaign, at least in that nature, outside of any politics, of course. And White House IT never existed until the Obama administration. So, government never really catching up with the times. They were utilizing a contractor that was super well known over in DC, which was L3. They turned into khaki, and they were handling the whole White House IT infrastructure. And so they were in the middle of a transition before the Trump administration came in and doing a network transition from intranet into a DoD network. And so they were utilizing all White House Communication Agency personnel, WACA, and that's mostly military radio guys. And so when the contract wasn't being renewed by khaki and they were focused just on WACA, we were only about 60% into the network migration that I was helping when I was an intern. And when I was about to graduate, they asked me if I wanted to come back full time. And, of course, I'm a conservative, but I love America so much. And the only way that you can truly love anyone or anything is to know all the good and all the bad. So for me, I was able to kind of put that to the side, stay in that apolitical role. When the Trump administration came in, it was myself and a few other people that were retained for transition to help oversee the network migration with WACA personnel. And from there, that's kind of when this all started to happen. Was the First Lady's office has the very first event that the White House rolls out, which is the governor's ball. And, people always talk about how the administrations, when they get all salty, they'll leave the whole White House and up in flames. And that's exactly what they did, but they did it on a far greater scale because they tried to use the Presidential Records Act as the reason for completely axing every single software system that the prior administration utilized to expedite their workflow, and made sure basically that network migration was on pause, and then all the other applications were moot, so they couldn't work at all.
This is a classic case of trying to handcuff a boomer by messing with their tech.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, and at that point too, just for perspective, they were all using BlackBerries, and I was handling even just the cell phones too.
I miss the BlackBerry.
I do. I like the simplicity.
Brick breaker?
Yeah, heck yeah, brick breaker. Yeah. So yeah, I'll cut it short, but so basically, the First Lady's office was dealing with, you think about like the security side, they weren't able to clear people in and out of the White House, especially for a mass of a governor's ball. That application that we made for the last administration was for place seating and getting them cleared by Secret Service and all these things. And so the First Lady's office switched to, like, they're right. They were like, well, to the IT department, if you don't have the application ready, then we need like a physical human being to be there to be the app. So I sat in the First Lady's office in the East Wing, and then from there it kind of just took off because we're working with some of the most historical offices and high-level offices, one being the executive clerk's office that handles everything that the president signs from start to finish because they're always at these events. So then they would always be like, oh, that's the IT girl, bring her in. So eventually I started working for them. They asked me to come on full-time with them and be their technical detail lead, but then also be one of their executive clerks. So I got to see everything the president signed, Trump, in his first term from start to finish, down to all the drafts, all general counsel being involved, NSC usually traditionally for memos, executive orders, whatever it may be, and then we would transmit all that to, or transport all of that stuff to Capitol Hill on behalf of the president. Maybe you saw me there. I don't know. At that point, yeah.
Well, Trump loves signing stuff.
Oh, he does.
He loves paper.
I mean, don't get me started on the auto pen, because we did. I was one of those people that literally had to put the paper down, which is very rare during the Trump administration. And that's a whole other thing too. We can talk about that after the fact. But yeah, did that, and then I would, to the point where he would sign it, put it together a press release, and disseminate to White House press. Which fast forward, then I'm seeing the press pool, and the OAN asked me to be their White House correspondent. So that's where I was for a bit, and then I spent the last 6 years being a security contractor, which is kind of fell.
We all know what that means.
Sure, it can mean anything.
You've definitely killed people.
I don't know how to wink. No, I didn't kill nobody. That's what they all say, right? Just kidding. No.
Exactly what someone would say.
I'm kidding. But yeah, so did that, and it was a really good transition between the IC and the DoD coming in at the Pentagon. I learned about the Pentagon position the same way everybody else did, seeing it on Twitter, or X, sorry. And so now I'm back here, and it's been awesome. I feel like I never left. Anyway. Long-winded, huh?
No, I think the buried lead there is that you applied 84 times. Like, what would have been your upper limit on that? Like, would you have gone to 200?
Oh yeah,
500?
I would have kept going. I was going every single, and then, oh gosh, when I was in college, like I would skipping lunch, skipping dinner, because we're a college kid. So I would be sitting in the library. I didn't have Wi-Fi, I didn't have a laptop. I would use the UPenn's library all the time, and sometimes I would stay overnight there. So I'd be in there, and every single day I'm like, maybe this is I would be so hopeful. Maybe this is the day. And I just keep applying all day long until I get an answer. But you know how usajobs.gov is? Like, they just give you the automatic no because it's like a computer trying to see if you're qualified or not. So I just needed to get somebody on the phone and say, listen, I can do this. So I didn't waste any taxpayer dollars when I was at the White House.
Wow.
Let me just say.
With you and Vish both on this program, there is such a high tolerance for rejection. It is a
keep on going.
Hold on, Gabby and I also have a background in IT. Getting into politics, I've found very few people who even understand IT in the first place, and so it's nice that like Gabby has a background in IT. I felt like when she was talking about network migrations, you were speaking my language. So very impressive.
You said, "Oh,
actually.
Stop it."
Yeah, oh yes. Yes, there's this leaning into the stereotype. Natalie Winters, you are doing an incredible job for the War Room, and you're just in a moment right now. How many, before we get into your background and how your unique way of reporting has really created a category, how many profiles are being written about you right now, are in production?
All press is good press.
Have published?
Yeah, I truly believe all press is good
That's
press.
Right.
I think it's funny, a lot of people probably wouldn't assume that Bannon or War Room World has, I think, nice relations with the legacy media. Obviously, we're very bellicose, belligerent with them on air, but I think it's great to be able to get our message out there. So I think at some point there should be a New York Times profile dropping on yours truly, which if you would have told me that they would be writing, hopefully, a nice article, I'm sure. Well, honestly, the smears don't even land, right? They smear us as being like too radical or seeking retribution. I'm like, bring it on, right? Didn't they do that to Trump on the campaign trail? They were like, Trump is really focused on retribution. The American people don't want it. I would humbly push back. But I do think it is quite interesting, their, not obsession, that sounds too self-obsessed, but Their obsession with me because I think that they have sort of, for whatever reason, kind of pigeonholed me as like the representative or face of a lot of this new media rollout in the White House. And I think with obviously what started it all, the infamous, Daily Mail piece, the criticism that I was dressed like, I believe, a hostess at Hooters, that they were really trying.
No one who wrote that has ever been to Hooters.
Yeah, I would not have gotten very far as a Hooters employee in my like Peter Pan collar cashmere sweater, but I digress. But I think it's really been a broader effort to sort of smear and mock and really impugn this whole new media initiative. So I think the like mocking of me as this, vapid then 23-year-old, I know, getting so old. I started Worm, when I was like 19. So I do feel old now, but that it's sort of part of a broader effort to go after that whole new media campaign.
Well, the smear, I think, is a little more precise than that. And your secret weapon is that you're brilliant and very hardworking. You're an incredible writer. You're an incredible investigative journalist. And people think you have this job because of how you look, because media is a visual medium. And so they criticize you for being attractive, and they use that as a smear to delegitimize the very substantive, groundbreaking, incredible work that you do. So I have to share, when I first met Natalie, Vish was producing The War Room. Natalie's job was to watch The War Room on any given day and then do a write-up about the news or interviews or events that had emerged out of those discussions. And she sent me this heartfelt, long text message after.
It was a Twitter DM.
A Twitter DM.
Twitter DM, not even text message.
Yes, Twitter DM indicating that she really wanted to work on Capitol Hill and would I consider her for an internship. And I thought, I made the worst HR decision I've ever made. And I've made some bad ones, but this is the worst HR decision I've ever made. I have hired Vish like 4 times, and the worst HR decision I've ever made was not hiring you as an intern. I thought, well, she's not in her 20s yet. She maybe needs some more seasoning. And then you went on through your work at the National Pulse to cover the Chinese Communist Party and their capture of American politicians like nobody else. And I was wondering maybe if you could share how you did that. What a day in the life, before anyone knew it was focused on your looks or your television appearances, when you were just doing the hard work of investigative reporting and bringing to light stuff nobody was talking about.
Yeah, it was all I did. I was concurrently in school in Chicago, but I was never there. I was always here in DC. And I think it's sort of the war room playbook that we use now, where I was always consuming legacy media, whether it was MSNBC, or reading sort of who was penning the op-eds, whether it was in the Washington Post or the New York Times, and was essentially running cover for the Chinese Communist Party. And at that time, it really was about the origins of COVID, and just, I think, a lot of the trade stuff that President Trump was doing, which I guess we're now seeing kind of come to bear again. But I was always interested in, like, who are these people who are shilling for the Chinese Communist Party and are running cover for them? And it was so easy. People always, I think, sometimes give me more credit than I maybe deserve, but you can see on these people's resumes, right, that a lot of the grants that they're taking are from Chinese Communist Party funded and controlled institutions. The, I think, initial story that I broke that really, I think, solidified or maybe started my career as sort of investigative reporter was how a bunch of legacy media journalists from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Harvard Business Review, Bloomberg, even Politico, you name it, the outlet, they were there, but that they were taking subsidized trips to China from the China-United States Exchange Foundation in exchange for, quote, favorable coverage and to, quote, disseminate positive messages, and I'm quoting from Foreign Agent Registration Act filings. And I was really miffed when I actually broke that story originally, because...
And how old were you when you broke that story?
I was 19. See?
Sharp brain.
Incredible.
What can I say? I get maniacally obsessed with something, and I will not let it go.
No, you had like a Carrie Matheson energy.
No, literally. And I was so annoyed when I was doing that story because none of the names of the individuals who had participated were included in the FARA filings. So I was like, I have to get to the bottom of this. And I always say, someone needs to subpoena Wilson Global Public Relations to get the list of all the journalists that participated in this. Although Matthew Iglesias, Ezra Klein, like an Atlantic editor, like big name people participated in it. But I was able to sleuth together the names of probably like a dozen or so people who had participated in those trips through deleted web pages, which is always the trick I always have up my sleeve. But I just think that the path for so many people in conservative media, and I'm sure you would agree with me, is sort of, you intern at Heritage, you start at the Daily Caller, and you do opinion-based commentary. And I just always had an aversion to that because I was, at the time, 19, and I was like, no one cares about my opinion, and they shouldn't, right? I haven't done anything. So I guess to overcompensate for that, all I would do was just report primary sources. It made my job easier, right? I had to write less. I would just copy and paste. But it really was the CCP angle, the sort of United Front Work Department Foreign Influence infiltration operations stuff, which then piggybacked onto the lies, the cover-up of the COVID origins, and then broadening out to the Ukraine stuff, the kind of color revolution stuff. Now where I think on War Room, after Steve went to prison, I was forced to sort of be more, I think, opinionated in my commentary. But it's something that I realized that I actually kind of do like. But now I feel like I've done enough where maybe my opinion matters, maybe 1%.
Well, the opinions are derived from fact, you know what I mean? And when you actually do the research, you know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, they also play a game, too, that I think is quite interesting, similar to like the origins of COVID, whereby they'll delete or erase all the evidence and then say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist because you can't put forth the evidence to back up your claim. And I think when you sort of look at the Ukraine aid packages...
And then when they find it, it's Russian disinformation.
Yes, right?
And then ultimately it did happen, but you should be grateful to the left for it. And then by the end, you're being prosecuted or persecuted for it.
Exactly. And there's actually a very interesting clip on MSNBC this Sunday where they were talking about how, I don't know, this might be breaking news, but we're heading towards a civil war, according to whatever brilliant CIA and January 6th committee scholar they had on, sure, a genius. But she was talking about how the only tactic that we could use, at least her first go around, to stop a potential looming civil war was the regulation of social media companies. And then she's like, but that doesn't work anymore because they don't want to do it and Trump's in power and Elon bad and blah, 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 blah. So now the only way that we can stop it is civil society, which I say there's nothing civil about Democrat civil society and there's really nothing societal. It's all funded by dark money, right? So my point there being that, like, yes, that's not traditional investigative reporting in terms of fact-based, but I think War Room and maybe my weird brain that gets obsessed with this stuff, we're all about pattern recognition. And I think that is the kind of the niche of War Room and just why Steve and I think had a mesh and why he hired me. I did not apply 84 times. I guess I've only ever applied for 2 jobs. Although interesting resume. I don't know how you hosted a show for a man who went to prison on there. But that sort of counter programming in and of itself is like a weird narrative version of investigative reporting.
But you've become the story in a lot of these. Like, people are covering you. They're not just...
It's weird. Every time I go on X, you're always on my homepage. So
a lot of people say
right,
that.
you know?
I'm not complaining.
I don't know. Maybe it's the algorithm. It's reverse shadow banning.
I want to get to that. I want to get Gabby's perspective on from an intelligence gathering standpoint. That you had the wherewithal to read Chinese media every day to figure out what loser former congressman was like getting paid to go give a speech, or what scientist or current were headed over there, and then you would just expose them every day by reading the Chinese media. And it gets back to what you were saying about knowing thy enemy, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think about like going behind enemy lines, either through open source media, working for an administration that maybe doesn't have the perspective you believe with, but to add context? Because we seem to be in a world now where even the appreciation of context, you're viewed as a traitor or someone who's not like fully with the cause. Yeah,
no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I kind of hearing Natalie speak and just talk about the fact that it's so clear just to put lines together, connect the dots. I mean, you're talking about looking at filings. You can look at, so one of the first things that came to my mind is this last summer, Optica Foundation's right down the street in Logan Circle. They were getting money from Huawei for the last 3 years, obviously under the Trump administration. And the one good thing, I say that the Biden administration did was continue on that barring of economic relationship between the United States and quote unquote Huawei, CCP.
But Huawei was building stuff all over rural America.
Oh,
and you know why
so
people
I
in
was
rural
saying,
America
it's
were
not-
buying it? It was cheap.
Well, and it's not necessarily enforced either, especially during this last administration, but it's just interesting to me because it's in every facet of life. If you just go through the filings, if you look at FEC and you
Should we
see who
just
puts
give up
money
and
where.
assume all of our stuff is being collected anyway?
Oh, yeah, you
we
should.
do the story about the DJI drones that the Florida Police
Yes.
Department was using? I think we broke that at the National Pulse.
You
Sort
did.
of partnered with you on that, I think, and you had maybe introduced legislation or something, or Hikvision, a lot of the cameras that they had been using that then Biden overturned the Trump era
Yes.
EO that had banned
different.
those.
I was about to say, with the executive order, one of the very first day in office, he had that whole stack of executive orders, and in one of them, it was supposed to be under the guise of some sort of climate change initiative, and it was actually putting in writing that the barring that the Trump administration did, saying that we're not going to use Chinese products in the U.S. power grid, he lifted that in that very first EO, day one. And it was interesting, too, because I have a lot of friends that are in DOD, and they were responding back to me, some of them that are actually liberal, which is funny considering the war complex, but they were saying, well, it's not that big of a deal because we traditionally don't utilize Chinese products within our own U.S. power grid. And I would say back to that, then what's the problem of having it in writing and making sure that never happens ever? Like, it's just that simple. So we're just in this very weird world, or we were in this weird world. Now we're entering a world where everything's pretty darn black and white. And this administration isn't going to allow things like that to happen.
I think it's going to happen either way. I look at Chinese ownership of port technology, of rail technology, of container technology, and shipping technology. And I remember toiling in this battle against TikTok, right? TikTok is digital fentanyl. We have to get rid of TikTok. And now I'm like, man, this stuff is all around us. It's all being collected anyway. Is resistance futile? Vish, are you ready to give in to your Chinese overlords?
Look, the Chinese have had every bit of data that the CIA has and everything else on you. I think, honestly, our data's already been out there so much. What I hate is that our data is being weaponized against us, right? And I think Bannon talks about this a lot, that we're in this sort of digital slavery right now where, I know, Matt, you talk about the name, image, likeness issue a lot. And when you consider that, the data that you create around you should also be included in the concept of that sort of, name, image, likeness, and the data you create by just being yourself and interacting with the world every day, that every other company on planet Earth can use, monetize, and weaponize against you, but you can't claim ownership to yourself. I think we should have our own data that we produce with whatever interaction with technology or the world is out there. That should be in sort of like a digital lockbox that then companies would have to license and pay you if they want to be able to use that data in their own calculations for their own products.
So the pushback on that is, if you go to that world, it's fine, but then the internet becomes very expensive. Well, the internet becomes very expensive because the one thing that has not been subject to inflation is the movement of data, is because the advertising tech has gotten so good to focus on every person that they know that. And so, like, if Ginger were here, she would say, well, it's not being weaponized against me that the internet tells me what bras I'm going to like and want to buy. And I think that's great. And the fact that I don't have to pay for Google and it has an awareness of my likes and dislikes is actually a service.
Yeah, well, it's never going to be a good position to be in. And I'll just even say from like a DOD, like IC perspective, is that a lot of these institutions and covert clandestine operations are actually happening more often in true name travel, just because they can't even obfuscate with alias. They're real biometrics, they're real data whatsoever. Down to even like our own passports, right? Those are all biometric passports since 2011 or 2006 when they started rolling them out. So you can see the little icon on your passport and go to the back and there's the microchip in there, and very similar to how you utilize, say, an RFID wallet to make sure that you're not getting skimmed. The same can be done to your passport. But then the weird thing is, right, is like if you take, not to go on this whole tangent, but then if you take out the microchip off a passport, if you took a microchip off of a credit card, you're still able to use all that data and make some purchases. But if you do that off of a passport, it's a federal crime on the back. I forget what statute it is off the top of my head, but you can take a look and see it yourself, and you're not able to use that to come in and out of the country. So it's just, it's a whole other element of we're constantly answering your question more of the sense of, is this how it is? Do you just assume that all your data is being taken? I mean, the answer is yes.
Like when you go to the TSA, do you let them take a picture of you? Or do you
let
bypass
them?
the picture?
I'd like to bypass the picture, but I'm telling you right now, all airports.
But do you?
Do I?
If you fly?
I'm going to say yes, not that I'm happy about it, but I'm just going to tell you, even if you bypass that, all those cameras that are
I got you.
in
but
those are collecting your data.
Do you bypass the picture?
I do. I have Clear, which is like probably really bad.
Clear, you're bypassing the picture, you're giving up
the same info.
I was with an ex-boyfriend. I had Clear. He didn't. And he was going to enroll. And he failed the test.
How?
About his family members.
Flag.
Major red flag. The person who was doing it was like, I've never seen this happen. I was like, who is this person? Okay.
Even I have Clear, and I have a questionable background.
No, he like didn't know who his family members were, which is probably its own red flag. But it's an interesting.
Let's get into this.
Oh man, another Daily Mail article. No, it's selective outrage too. I think it's quite interesting, right? Obviously, being in the White House press briefing room, all these people being apoplectic, melting down over President Trump wanting to, take over Canada or the Panama Canal or the GI-UK gap, which we can have our debates over that. But none of those people said anything when the Chinese Communist Party was essentially infiltrating this country, de facto invasion, maybe not kinetic, or I don't know, this thing called the Belt and Road Initiative, right?
Yep.
Taking over, seizing infrastructure, imports. And I think my favorite angle of attack that I love hearing now, I believe, what was it, last year, like the World Economic Forum was warning that like cyber pandemics and cybersecurity, that was going to be the new...
Oh no, we're all going to be locked down because the computers
CISA was convinced. They rolled out so many reports.
CISA, rest in power to CISA. But I think the cybersecurity angle is very interesting, and this idea of like that we're being hacked, right, by the Chinese Communist Party. Obviously, it's true, but like Microsoft, for example, all these private companies, I don't even think it's so much a government thing. Microsoft set up Windows China Government Edition, right? They are so deeply, and that's the operating system. If you were Chinese, you would be working for the Microsoft operating system under Xi Jinping. And they consult, contract, do so much business, right, with the Chinese Communist Party, where they're essentially, it's not just IP theft, they're handing them the keys to the kingdom, right? They're
building it for them.
Yeah, I don't feel bad when Microsoft gets hacked. It's like, what do you expect?
Right.
You're working with the Chinese Communist Party. You're giving them your IP. You're giving them everything that they could ever want. I think that being said, I think the cybersecurity issue has also definitely been weaponized. We saw that sort of as the pretext, and I was going to say Patriot Act, all that, but with CISA, right, the idea that the cybersecurity threat was so looming and prevalent that we had to prop up this weird agency that we saw really just get sort of converted into a, monitoring disinformation, monitoring, election conspiracy stuff.
That's a great point.
Even true information.
Yeah.
But that was a huge piece of focus for them. CISA specifically talking about the election apparatus leading up into this prior election, saying they had all this guidance for every single federal and local or state election on how to combat misinformation and how if it's presented to you, how to sway voters more or less.
The tools that people used during the Cold War abroad for dominating the information space, came home to roost. And what we know is when we develop a capability that we're using against a foreign adversary, it actually isn't all that long before our own people experience it here, and we didn't have those safeguards in place, and now we have to live with the consequences.
I think what we've seen with sort of Resistance 2.0 against Trump is that there really is no meaningful distinction between foreign policy and domestic policy. In other words, right, all the USAID agency tactics that they use to foment these color revolutions, the agitations of certain protest groups, or just this idea of democracy, right? That's like the scariest word you can ever hear from someone who's part of the deep state.
But they don't do it as much anymore. Have you noticed that? As a little change? I don't hear them complaining about democracy in the same way they did before they lost the election.
I would
now
posit
it's like they don't fight enough. Or
that this idea that the stakes are so high and we gotta stand on the House floor and be a theater kid for 25 hours. I think Rachel Maddow's show is very instructive in the sense that one of the key tenets of Norm Eisen's color revolution playbook, impeachment and the election stuff aside, is this idea of contested opposition and illegitimacy of, say, President Trump. But that's really hard to square with someone who won both the popular vote and the Electoral College. So if you watch Rachel Maddow every night, which I'm sad to report that I do,
I know that enemy.
Yeah, she spends 20 minutes every single show opening with nonstop footage of protests across the country. They debuted the first ever 20 box, not a 2 box, not a 4 box, but a 20 split screen of all these protests happening across the country. So I would almost argue that they're sort
Think of all those cats that have been left alone.
I know, and the dogs. But I think they're sort of in the second stage. I think they made their democracy case, right? They made this is the threat, and now I think when they talk about autocracy, it's dictator Trump.
It's the oligarchy now. It's the rich people.
And you know, all that protest is obviously being funded by billionaires, so square that hypocrisy. But I think it's a lot more dangerous than I think, like I was talking about that Civil War segment on MSNBC. You're really seeing an escalation in the rhetoric. Pramila Jayapal.
Vish has thought we've been headed for a civil war for years.
I agree. I think it's like a weird hybrid warfare version of it. Pramila Jayapal is on Maddow calling for her audience to be, quote, strike ready, and saying that like violence is coming, and they're doing these trainings with the Harvard Ash Center for Democracy.
I mean,
the whole story. It's crazy.
Pramila Jayapal, I think, represented the Chaz. So their version of strike ready probably means you have your poetry book already tucked under your arm.
But they're not disavowing, I think, the Tesla stuff, and their base has already tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Like, they're trying to give them the political, moral, and ethical cover to do that.
I know, while they're destroying the environment. These Tesla protests have such a big carbon footprint.
Irony.
But
Okay,
you know who
I feel
doesn't
like
have a
Vish
carbon
has that. I was gonna
footprint?
say
Vish
Vish.
Burrow.
Yeah, well, I want
He
to
owns an
tie it all
e-bike
together.
now.
To tie it all to what everyone's kind of talking about, I think that what Resistance 2.0 now is that the presupposition undergirding the whole thing is that democracy is dead, right? I think that that's what they're selling to their audience now. And so now what's to be concerned with is the rise in authoritarianism, right? The rise of autocracy, the rise of the rule by the oligarchs, because they're almost reverting back to an old playbook now, which is to hate the billionaires, right? That's something that's very familiar and very safe for them. And so with, Donald Trump and Elon Musk being there, they're actually kind of finding an easier time in painting that picture. But the problem is that they're only preaching to their choir, right? And so they are now in this 2.0 mode where be strike ready, because essentially they've already kind of struck and taken down democracy. Authoritarianism is rising, but they don't call it right-wing authoritarianism, at least not yet. But they're calling it authoritarianism because they still want to preserve a sort of patina of being the protectors of democracy that's now damaged or dead. And so we need to be strike ready to go after this rising oligarchic authoritarianism that we're now seeing with Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
And if you're going to fight authoritarianism, you might need drugs. And that's where All Family Pharmacy comes in. RFK Jr. has called it out. Big Pharma and the government work together to suppress treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Why? Because if they admitted those treatments worked, they couldn't rush through the vax. And let's be honest, Big Pharma wasn't about to let effective alternatives cut into their billion-dollar payday. They didn't just push the vaccine. They made sure you had no other options. Big Pharma wanted to be in charge of your health, not you. They wanted total control, and they used the government to get it. That's why I trust All Family Pharmacy. They provide ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, and more. The very medications that others tried to keep out of your hands. No red tape, no corporate pressure, just real options. And it's not just emergency meds. You can even get your everyday maintenance medications as well. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Use code MATT10 for 10% off. Don't wait. Be prepared. Take control of your own health care. Gabby, do you agree with Vish that democracy is already dead?
Well, it's dead considering that half the country was okay, or the Democrats were okay with being told who they need to vote for and ousting, Joe Biden and putting Kamala Harris in the seat. There's no, that's what's so bizarre to me, is that it's so clear as day that everything that the left has been saying and screaming about is exactly what they did to their own people. I know we talk about this all the time, but I'm wondering in society and with these younger people, it's like, what are we missing? What messaging are we missing? Does it just does it come with age? Does it becoming wiser?
No, the young people are the ones that are the most based now.
Yeah, which is great, but at the same time,
the young ones have seen like their older millennial brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles like live a more miserable life in a pod somewhere, get into some 30-year fixed mortgage that isn't going to ever build wealth, that goes and accrues $150,000 in college debt to get some $42,000 a year starting job, and what they've said is, we're staying home with our parents. We're not necessarily going to college. But you know what? Now they actually want to get married and have families. And which direction do you think the under 30s are going, Natalie?
Well, to answer, fuse that with your question too. I think War Room is probably partly responsible, as they would say, for killing democracy. So I'll go give Steve Bannon a pat on the back for that. But I think it sort of gets to the question, the heart of it, like what even is democracy, right? What Americans are benefited by the USAID concept of soft power abroad, right? If you look at democracy through the lens of what they purport Ukraine to be, well, then democracy seems to be just like some limited hangout, siren song cover for a way that the globalist elites can enrich themselves off of really weird color revolution tactics, money laundering, unaudited aid packages. So yeah,
I would wear this to Ukraine.
I was saying, you're getting very Zelensky.
I was gonna say,
I'm
Matt,
going full like Zelensky in the springtime.
I was gonna say, Matt, when did you
post-peace deal?
I was going to say, Matt, when did you decide that you wanted to do your best impression of Vladimir Zelensky with that outfit? One of your favorite lines is saying, "Who's the next guy in a sweatsuit that's going to run Ukraine?" I guess that's going to be you.
Me. I want Crimea. They can have the rest of Ukraine. I want Crimea.
You got to shut down the biolabs.
I think that this would be the outfit to do just that. To shut down the biolabs in. I think that you're right that we viewed soft power through the lens of the worst forms of bribery. Like, we don't even do bribery right. The Chinese get bribery. It's a bunch of U.S. dollars in a suitcase delivered to some prime minister's cousin somewhere, which I think is like pretty close to what happened in the CEFC case, where they were involved in that stuff before the Hunter Biden
cousin,
stuff.
Yeah.
Right, whatever. But I think that you've got this global a situation where the Chinese bribe, the Russians provide muscle, and then we show up like wondering when you're going to have Transgender Day of Awareness.
We couldn't even do the Belt and Road Initiative if we wanted to, right? Like, we would try to win hearts and minds. I mean, I don't even really think the trope of like the transgender musical is all that reductive. Like, that's what we're funding, right? And I think that Ukraine is sort of this great example of it, but I think it plays itself out time and time again. And I think the most compelling thing that I saw under Biden, when they saw that the support for the Ukraine stuff was dipping, plummeting, they're hemorrhaging support faster than, I guess, Kamala, they were like, how do we dupe the American people into supporting this? And instead of saying, we'll do a comprehensive, full-scale audit, we'll show them the facts, we'll show them the numbers, they were like, we're going to lie to the American people and do a whole propaganda, brigade, or barrage rather, in local media saying that the Ukraine aid packages are really good for the American industrial base and for American workers. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe it's good for the Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed CEO, but it's not really great for the average American worker.
Well,
and
also, sure, building stuff is good for the economy. We could build stuff for us.
Build anything.
That'd be nice.
Right, and we could keep
imagine
it. We wouldn't have
the
to send it elsewhere.
America that we would live in if military defense contractors and the military industrial complex viewed the southern border as a region as lucrative to weaponize as they did like every other country or the Middle East.
The only way to do that is to send some Kurds there. Because they care about any place where you put Kurds.
And some minorities and some apparently gay Venezuelan refugee or some Tren de Aragua members.
You know what? We're doing the next transgendered musical in El Paso so that the globalists will care about the southern
Sounds great.
border.
No, it's so buck wild to me because we've talked about this before, but even the government as a whole, I mean, the Ukraine, there's a non-frat policy, we've talked about this, right? Where it's your traditionals, your China, your Russia, your North Korea, Iran. Belarus is on there. Ukraine was also on there, and it wasn't until the the Biden administration.
Wait, when you say a no frat policy,
it's a no frat policy for certain. So there's a non frat policy in the government wide, but there were particular covert groups within the agency, meaning that they basically not a friend. Not conversational. They can't do lodging with anyone from Ukraine or anyone that's on that list. They cannot do business with them. Nothing.
So
there's nothing
is it fair
at all.
to say that we should not send weapons to a country that our own public servants cannot have a one-night stand with?
Yeah, I think that's that's an easy ask. I mean, why not? And so, but it's just absolutely wild because that was always a relentless yearly briefing for specific groups within the intelligence community. And as soon as the Ukraine war popped off, like right before it became national news, suddenly on those briefs, Ukraine was off the list, and it was noticeable, but no one was ever able to ask questions about it. So that just brings on a whole other element of, this whole propaganda and trying to fool the American people. They were also, the larger government is trying to fool the people who do sign up for the right reasons and want to serve their country.
I wonder if we'll get fooled again, because you see where the hawks are going next. They've kind of lost the argument on Ukraine, in no small part thanks to your incredible reporting at the War Room and the way you guys have mobilized a vocal audience of ambassadors.
I think you helped us in Congress.
Well, I did my part, but the Iran threat seems to be one that has a lot of focus, the China threat, and I just wonder how much of that is constructed in some ways. Not so much as to China, but with Iran.
Well, just real quick on the China stuff, that was what actually made me sort of resentful of doing my reporting, because I saw all these neocon sort of establishment Republicans.
That was neocon anti-red porn.
Exactly, using it to justify a bloated defense budget. And I'm like, okay, well then delist them from the stock exchange if there's such a threat. Like, stop buying Alibaba stock. But on the Iran...
We gave them money for the businesses the Chinese owned in the United States after COVID.
Yes, I remember. That was the first War Room hit that I ever did. Fun fact, I didn't have Wi-Fi in my house, so I had to do it at a friend's house, and I was standing up. We've come very far. I now have a home studio.
Nice.
I'll probably get swatted in, no. But
one day.
to the Iran point, yeah, I mean, I think what you did in Congress, right, the idea of needing the authorization, the use of force stuff, like, I think that paradigm still exists, and I think we're playing on a very slippery slope of being able to just start striking people and doing it sort of.
Well, how proud were you of J.D. Vance when you saw in the Houthi group chat that he was working to apply some logic and reason to whose interests were most affected there?
But isn't it sad that that's so out of the ordinary for, like, saying that, hey, countries...
I'm glad anyone on the Houthi group chat was saying these things.
But it's just wild. Like, it should have been inverse, right? The fact that, like, that's an anomaly is just so absurd.
Yeah. No, I'm still wanting answers for 2014, 2015 when we did the Yemen retrograde of soft elements. We were getting hit so badly by the strikes over by the Houthis and Iran strikes that the direction from the soft elements, they were told to ditch all of their gear and put it inland out on the coast of the Red Sea and cover it with cement. And so all of that stuff is still there, and since then all we've done is operate about 120 kilometers out. Granted, yes, have our strikes been...
but why do we want to be in Yemen?
No, I'm not saying that we want to be.
Why
I'm just
should
saying
we give
I agree.
rip about the Houthis?
No,
it's an honest question.
No, and I'm with you, but I'm just saying in the sense of, like, we still are kind of just like tripping over ourselves and trying to handle a situation so far and yonder out there, and we haven't corrected any former mistakes, and we have all this gear still down there, and there's no response. It's like we do things and then we kind of just move along.
I'm no military
next
strategist, but I know this. Nobody has ever won and controlled anything with just a bunch of airstrikes. So we could bomb them to smithereens, we could bomb them again, but we're not going to, like, displace the Houthis from Yemen with a series of air bombings. So then the question becomes, who's going to actually go in there and occupy Yemen, if not the Houthis? I do not want that to
Victoria
be the United States.
Nuland needs a new hobby.
Yeah, I send Fauci. I don't know.
I also think, too, like, say for some reason the Houthis are, like, the new big bad guys in town. I just don't understand then, not Democrats explicitly or solely, but then, like, they're sort of established Republican wing, too. Then those should be the people who are the loudest people in the room saying that we need to shut down the southern border because the Houthis are going to be exploiting that, right? They're going to be in here trying to commit terrorist attacks. It's just, you can't square the logic train.
I don't think your average Houthi has been more than, like, 20 miles from their home.
Exactly.
Okay?
But that's exactly my point. It's all fake and performative, and it's like, right, I guess the cliche, the ghost of John Bolton, right? He never seems to go away. I guess he's still alive. But it's the same old, same old. They need a new cash cow.
Alive and not with Secret Service protection anymore.
Or security, something like that.
You know, the good thing about that is that he looks like so many other people I see in DC. So, like, he's just blending in the mix. Like, he doesn't. Do you really need the protection?
John Bolton is a disguise in and of himself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's true.
There's
Every time
nothing to
when
fear
you go to
from the
like
Iranians and the Houthis.
Halloween, or what is it, Party City? You know, like, don't you ever see like the masks where it's like glasses and a mustache? I'm like, he's good. Like,
That's
he's
right.
good. He's good. He doesn't need.
I'm
The
for
next
it.
Halloween costume.
Yeah.
All right, to close out, we got to do this segment because I told everybody to prepare for it. I want to talk about what the biggest vibe shift, or at least one that everyone has been able to assess from kind of the you can choose from the Biden era to the Trump era, or from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0. And Natalie, first I want to hear like the vibe shift in the White House briefing room where you go to work every day. Bring us in the room.
I feel
Tell
like
us
I
about
am
it.
ground zero of the vibe shift.
You are the vibe shift.
Everyone hates me. No.
The vibe shift is pink.
They love to hate me. No. Well, there's several new media outlets in there, right? And I think it's really just a reflection of sort of the trend, the ascendancy. I've called it a Thucydides trap of the legacy media and the new media stuff, which I think there's even a sort of an interesting inherent, almost tacit admission there that all the new media that's growing and expanding is right-leaning, right? That's what they try to do the gotcha on. Oh, well, the new media is just right-wing. It's like, yeah, don't you understand? That's called a self-own. But when I'm actually in there, I mean, they have like posters all over the wall, like we stand with AP.
I've seen those.
And I was standing in the restroom, and there was like a group of people outside, and they were like, it was like a Tuesday. They're like, this week, it's just, I can't believe they're trying to deconstruct like everything and just take it all down. Very, very Bannon-esque. And they're like, this is not what the American people want to hear about. And I was like, no, that's precisely what the American people voted for. So it's cool to have a front row seat to like the hotbed, ground zero of resistance. But I would say I'm kind of underwhelmed. They're pseudo-intellectuals. They're really not all that intelligent.
And they
Like,
dress
I'm not very
terribly.
bothered.
They dress terribly.
They really do.
With a few
Well, I'm
exceptions.
anti-pantsuit because I think embracing your femininity.
I got
and
a
not-
short suit on.
There
Just
you
wanna-
go.
She got it in.
I didn't want everybody to know I was wearing shorts. Okay,
I
back
love
to you.
wearing pink. You know, what
Amazing.
can I say? They don't like it. So, you know, I like to double down, become obsessed. But
know, but I thought the future
my
was
last
female.
point on the fashion,
Pink's
though,
good, right?
which I was talking about recently in one of my profile pieces. I don't know if it'll make the cut. But there's always these long, glowing profiles on, like, Caitlin Collins and those types for dressing so professionally and how they view their pantsuits and their blazers as like how to convey a sense of professionalism on air. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's what you want to do. My information is compelling because it's true and the American people know that it's true. So even if I were wearing a tank top and I had a horrible background behind me, the facts are on my side. I don't need to do this whole performative, you know, costuming to try to dupe the American people into believing what I'm saying.
One person who knows a lot about performative costuming is Vish Burra. Vish, what vibe shift have you noticed?
Well, I think for me, the vibe shift in the streets is always the most important. And, you know, back in 2017, when I was a young activist out in Manhattan, and there were lots of protests happening outside of Trump Tower in the fresh days of his presidency, you know, it would only be like me, the crew of dudes who were, you know, the activists at the time, and the girls with us who would all be wearing MAGA hats. Now, today, you go out into the streets of Manhattan or even downtown San Diego, I happen to see a few women wearing MAGA hats just walking around. That was unheard of, right? When Trump won during that Resistance 1.0 era. Another thing, as I was riding my e-bike into work the other day, I noticed there was a pickup truck in front of me, and he's got a massive Trump sticker on his rear window. Again, just unheard of. The fact that people are openly expressing their support for Trump, for MAGA, for America First, the fear factor is now totally gone. That is a massive vibe shift, right? Because on the ground, especially with the grassroots, if every day those people show up and express their support openly without fear, that only allows our movement to grow, because other people will then find that it's okay to express their love for Trump, MAGA, or America.
Gabby, what's your vibe shift?
I gotta tell you, I was in California recently. I was in San Diego, and same thing. I saw MAGA hats, and no one blinked twice. Anything that I heard from anyone was, "I like your hat," and I told the girl I liked her hat too. So I'm with it, but obviously I have to answer from a DoD perspective because I can't help myself. And just being at the Pentagon, okay. First off, they decided that they're no longer allowing for nail polish. So the Biden administration said yes to nail polish, yes to highlights. You can do your thing, be sassy with it, go transgender. And this administration totally cut the cord on that. So the
nail
vibe
polish
shift,
and highlights?
Yeah, no more highlights, no more nail polish. It's good. Because what
no
is it?
balayage?
No, none of that. No, you can't do it. You can't do it. So you don't look too excited about this, but this is a good thing. We don't want the vibe shift is good.
Against highlights?
Listen.
I don't know that you got to be mid to win wars.
Hey, can I just say this goes for the guys and the
That's
girls?
an amazing
Point
quote.
being,
Yeah.
Point being that the guys are not doing their nail polish. They don't got their frosted tips going on. Everyone is coming to work in uniform as expected with this administration.
I had frosted tip ones.
Oh, did you?
That's
okay. It was a
90s.
phase.
It was
It's
the
all right.
90s.
It's all right. I haven't done it before, but maybe when I start graying a little bit, I'll do a little something.
So the imagery.
The imagery from the Pentagon, I say heck yeah to that, but also the sentiments too, because I'm hearing a lot of people, especially on the public affairs side, which those people actually do tend to lean a little bit more liberal, and they're down to clown with the new initiative that we're going back to the war. Like I'm a military guy. It's I'm here for the war, not for the war. I'm just protecting the country. Like that whole sentiment is back in. And I like that. Plus, also, they're all hyped up about getting down at the southern border and actually doing good work. Everyone wants to get in on those types of missions more so than anything else. So just having a reason to be there and showing up to work the right way, no frosted tips, no nails. I like it.
But are the women still allowed to have highlights? Just for clarity.
No, they are not. They're not.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
how do you prove that?
Well, I'm not part of MEPS. I don't know the medical complex that well. But I guess if you do get some highlights or whatnot, you just do a really darn good job at the roots, and then no one knows.
Do you have
That's
highlights?
probably hard in DC because the hairstylists
Are so dang bad. I know.
I do balayage as opposed
That's
to
okay.
highlight.
Yeah,
What's
you're serving the
balayage?
country in a different way,
It's
so you're allowed.
more
It's good.
blended. Although honestly, I got my hair done in DC, so my roots are probably not.
No,
too
they look good. I can
but-
see it.
but-
Have you heard of this term, recession brunette? Where like if the economy
like
isn't
letting
going
it-
well, then
No, that's what I'm
they'll
doing.
grow out
That's
a
what I'm
little
doing.
bit.
For me, that was prison brunette. When Steve was in prison, I had no free time. I was like, I don't have time to get my hair done because it takes
Prison
like
brunette.
12 hours. So I probably was a little darker than usual.
Your prison brunette era. Excellent. My vibe shift is the turn away from anger and toward more happiness in this
Oh, that's
version
good.
of Trump
Yeah,
2.0.
okay.
Hence
I
the-
remember back in 2017 and 2018 how just jilted we felt that they were accusing us of being Russian agents.
Yeah.
They accused me of being Putin's lawyer. They accused Trump of all this crazy stuff in
Accused
Russia.
you of having highlights.
And
Who bought you that tracksuit?
We were so. I know. I'm just leaning in now.
Yeah.
I'm fully leaning in. But that colored how we saw things. And now, even after the lawfare, the indictments, the assassination attempts, there's more joy in the MAGA movement. And I see it in my friends who work in the administration, who are in the cabinet. And it's not like fear that the next moment you're going to have grand juries, subpoenas, not able to feed your family because you have $250,000 in legal bills on a government employee salary. And I think that unlocks an unlimited potential for this crew. And I'm really proud of them. And I think they're doing a great job.
What a nice light note.
We are
like
so
that.
back.
Yeah, we are back. All right.
I
Our
hope
freedom
you'll
rang.
be back. I loved this discussion.
Yeah, me
Frankly, I
too.
think Vish and I kind of ruined it, and it would have been better just as the two
Me
of
and
you.
Natalie just bebopping.
But we are grateful for everyone. We would ask you to give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, and make sure you are subscribed to Anchormen. We'll be back soon.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.